Let's see, we are in cd.net, ls. We were in week 10 last week, right?
Yeah.
Let me disable that for you real fast. So this week we're in week 11. Let's head into week 11. Good. Yeah, so last week we made an API that was its own project, in this React app, its own project. Pretty much starting with two basic templates and working in conjunction with each other.
Yeah.
That's all fine and dandy and a very valid approach and probably how you build your final project. But there's also a very popular approach that says, hey, let's stick our React app right inside of our .NET app. And that's what we're going to work on today. So we have an empty directory. And let's for a second, let's check out our template that we have listed. I believe you already installed this one.
Yeah. SDG templates web API.
Yep, SDD core web API, not that one. SDG React plus .NET template. So I'm going to do that .NET new SDG React, and we'll call this AutoTrader. All right?
Okay.
So if we look at what we have what looks to be a standard .NET application. We have our program, we have our startup, we have our pages, our controllers. Everything looks kind of familiar, right?
Yeah. You did a .NET new SDG dash React.
This is what I did.
Okay.
Are you following along, or?
No, I'm not
Okay.
following. I'm just taking notes.
Okay.
So I knew how to do a new SDG/API, and that was for the backend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So it gave us a whole bunch of stuff. Let me run .NET Restore on it. So it gave me a whole bunch of stuff here. And a lot of this should feel kind of familiar, at least. You know, we have our database context, our startup, we have our controllers in here. But now we have this new folder called Client App. Now this Client App is just a React project.
Okay, so you got your AutoTrader API you already had created last week.
Yep.
And then you just .NET new SDG dash React and gave it a new name?
Yep. Yeah, I'm created a new name, new folder, new everything. I'm creating a completely separate one.
How does it have your old AutoTrader information?
Not yet. We're gonna move that stuff over.
So what you've just created is a .NET app with React in it?
Yep.
By doing that?
Yep.
Okay. So it's all new.
Yep, it's all brand new. We're going to take what we did last week and we're going to pull it over.
Okay. And that's just because we had installed those templates in before. That's why I noticed to do this. Okay.
Yep.
So would I be able to do this with my capstone if I wanted to, because those templates are in there?
You totally could. And I would recommend this, at least for if you're planning on having an admin side. So we can talk about different architecture styles here real fast. Because right now we're talking about two different architecture styles. The first one is kind of what we're used to. Our React app is separate, and our API is also separate by itself. So the good thing about that is that now our API and our front end and our back end are completely agnostic from each other. What that means is that it doesn't matter whether it's a React front end or a Vue front end or a JavaScript front end, a mobile app front end.
Okay.
It's completely isolated by itself. I can change things in the front end without affecting the back end, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. That's great. But I'm also now managing two separate projects. Like they're two separate Git repositories.
Oh.
They're hosted on two separate servers. Like it's
Interesting.
it's double the work, but I have that kind of ability to switch things in and out, and I kind of have working two different pans on a stovetop instead of putting everything in one. So, do you cook?
Yeah.
Have you ever made two things on a stovetop before?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. Like you can work both individually and separately. Versus this way that we're going to do today is like we're using one big pan.
Oh, okay. Now I get the reference. Okay.
So it's a bit it's still you can still do the same things, but the results are slightly different.
Okay. So I installed the two templates that allow me to do. Well, they're separate, right? One was a template to web API.
Yep.
Well, you would need to have both installed to do this.
You only need this template, SDG React template installed.
Okay.
That's using our big pot to do everything.
Okay. All right.
All right. So we have our React app in here, app.js. It's a bit more developed than what the Create React app was before. There's a whole bunch. There's some sample components here that you probably end up deleting at some point. But let's just run this to see what we have. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
So .NET watch run. So before our .NET watch run would just build it and then stand up a port, right?
Yeah.
Well, now it's going to. That's not good. You might have to reinstall the template after I fix that.
Okay.
Apparently, I packaged up the template before I added the using statement.
Reinstall just the React one?
Yeah. I'll let you know whenever it's updated. So now it's doing its thing. It's building. You notice I was taking a little bit longer to build this time?
Yeah.
That's because it's not only building your backend, it's also doing all the front end stuff as well. So it's doing all the NPM modules. It'll just take this long the first time, but ever after that, it'll be a lot faster. But what this build process is doing is not only is it saying, hey, go through my C# files to make sure that all those are correct and running. It's also taking our React files and building those and bundling those as well. So it started, still waiting, still waiting. So with this template, not only do you get React and .NET together, but you also get what's called bootstrap. You've heard of it, I'm sure you've heard of bootstrap. I've been thrown around a few times. I think we looked at templates last week.
Right.
But Bootstrap is a front-end CSS CSS framework.
Is that where we got our samples from?
Yep. If we actually look at our homepage, we'll see we have a whole bunch of stuff here. That's not a good example. Where's a good example? Where's a good example? I'm trying to find some good Bootstrap examples, and there's like nothing here. So like here's the best example of Bootstrap, is that it gives us these predefined buttons, these predefined classes that we can just throw onto our buttons to make them look a certain way. So we're saying, hey, this is a button. And it also has the primary button class as well. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and while that builds, we can look at the documentation. Oh, there we go. It got there. So it's running, still running on the same ports. So we had localhost 5001. Instead of getting Swagger, like you got last time, you'll get this. We've got something with a title bar. You can't see that very well.
Yes.
But just head over to the counter page that we were on. This button is now styled. That styling, that blue, that on click. See how that hover as well?
Yeah.
All of that is already predefined for us because we gave it this class BTN primary.
Is all that CSS visible to us?
Yep. So if we go to get bootstrap it's like getbootstrap.com, but it's bootstrap 4 that we're on. Here's all the stuff that we have. So we would do this, we as a team would go, hey, we're using Bootstrap. So that means that if we want to put a form on the page, like our auto trader has a form, right? I'm going to come over here to components. And this has every single part that could be on my page. And it has some already predefined sample styles and classes that we can just kind of plop on. So if I wanted to do forms, I'm going to go to forms. And it's like, hey, here's what a form should look like. Here's this HTML and CSS for that form. We don't need to write any new CSS. We can modify it if we wanted to.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, here's what it should look like.
So how would you use Bootstrap? You'd come in here and take the example, put it in yours, and modify it.
Yep, that's exactly it. So let's take our old React app and let's plop it in here and let's bootstrap it.
You bring the app into here?
Mm-hmm. So we're just going to bring the code over. So let's just do that together.
Okay.
Where is my terminal? Here we go. So now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to open up our car search admin. So I'm just going to bring over all of this. Actually, let's bring over the render for right now. And we'll bring over the rest as we build up functionality.
Okay.
Let's come over to home and let's replace this render with the render that we have.
Okay.
So I pretty much just would boop, copy and paste right over. So in order to get this to work, we need a couple things inside of our state, right? If you recall correctly.
Yeah.
We need, yep. So let's bring over our state as well. Let's head back to our home page, and here is our form. Okay, there's nothing there, but it's still a form. So I want to bootstrap it. So we look over here and look at, well, what we have. So for a standard input box, it looks like we have a div that has a class form group. We have a label in the actual input. And if we wanted to add some text, we have something called a small. But we don't need the small, but we need the label in the input. So let's just bring over this. No, let's bring over this. It doesn't matter. This is just a good starting point.
Okay.
So whenever I use Bootstrap, what I like to do is just straight up bring over the examples without changing anything. So I'm going to place this inside of my form. And even though I'm not actually entering the email address of what it's saying right here, I just want to bring it over to make sure that it works correctly.
Yeah.
So does this match up to the documentation? Yeah. And it does. So now we can go through and we can add, so the first one we have is year, right? So let's make this, let's add our name year here. You're no longer type email, you're type text. Year input for the ID. And so pretty much everywhere where it says email address, you now replace it with what you want it to be.
Right.
So year, get rid of that. Enter year. We don't need our small anymore. But we also need our on change event because we need that. So you notice how this input's getting a bit long? We can clean it up by using good formatting.
Yeah.
There it is, card year. So now we can do that for each one. What we should do, and we can do this if you want to do this, is we can actually turn this into a component.
Right.
Because we're going to be reusing a lot of that same kind of format over and over and over again. We could do that. I'm not, because I'm just going to do this real fast. So we have what? Color and current mileage.
Yeah.
Name is color. Color. What are your thoughts as I do this?
We are using the bootstrap template that's giving me all my styling and everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically changing the names of things so it works with what I'm trying to do.
Yep.
I mean, it's a rough explanation of it.
Mm-hmm. Car year, car color, current mileage.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we've hit our checkbox.
Yeah. Checkbox.
So come over here. Checkbox. All I did. So Bootstrap has their documentation set up really nice. If you notice, this is all on the same page. So I just did a Control F for checkbox. So their built-in checkbox works. Name. And the on change.
Does it matter where you put the on change in that line?
Nope. It really doesn't, as long as it's on the input. That's it. As long as it's on the input somewhere. The order of those elements really doesn't matter. Actually, it might matter if you're on some crazy weird edge case. I have not come into a case where order matters. But it's good to kind of keep your stuff organized somehow.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have our new car. And now select the dealer, which is a drop down. Drop downs. So it looks a bit different. I don't know if that's exactly what we want.
Yeah.
So the reason why this, just so you know what I'm thinking, is I know that our dropdown is currently a select tag with options, but this one's giving me a div with a bunch of A tags. So that should feel off to you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to come up here. Instead of dropdown, I'm going to do a select. That looks better. So now we want to, looks like we just have to add a class here. That looks to be it. Select a dealer and a model ID, input. Number, model ID, model ID, input. We want to make our button a bit more stylish. Class name equals BTN primary. And then we've now bootstrapped our project, and it looks so much better now, right? Like just like right off the bat. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling okay.
Okay. So now that we have that, add car form. So now for us to bring over anything else, to actually make this page living, we need to actually now add the API side of things. Right. So we do that the exact same way that we have before.
We get some models.
Yep. Models.
And controllers.
Yep.
Do your EF migrations.
Yep. That is correct. Models. I'm going to be revealing Finder. Since we already have the models done. Do you know about the open command?
Mm-hmm.
The open command will open up whatever you are, whatever
you're asking it to.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of double clicking on a file.
Okay.
So like if I had like an index file, like an HTML file, and I did like open index.html, it'll actually open it in Chrome. If you give it a directory, like car search API or dot,
right,
it'll open up in Finder.
Okay.
So it's kind of a quick, easy way to kind of navigate between the two. So I'm going to take my models over here. Novice Mac user. And I'm really just copying and pasting over. Because I'm taking them from my separate two projects and I'm moving it over to this new project.
Yeah. You create a new models folder,
yep,
and then instead of copying and pasting the code over, you're just copying over the files.
Yep. And then I head into here and change it from, actually I'm going to keep that, car search API. Car search API models. Because I actually like that namespace.
Mm-hmm.
So let me update the capitalization a little bit. Yes, replace. Ugh,
I wouldn't do that.
why did I do that?
Right.
Not fine. And then over here in my data context, we'll bring over our seed data. Because remember, this is the data that we need to actually have our app run.
You got that from your old database context?
Yep.
Okay.
And I'm going to bring over my
Migrations.
actual schema as well.
Schema.
So, because remember, this is where we're actually setting our actual table inside of our database. This is inside of our database context. So now that we have that made, now we need to run our migrations and everything.
Yeah.
With .NET EF migrations. Yep. Add, create added models from standalone project. .NET EF
Database update.
Yep, database update.
You got our migrations.
Ah, shoot. Forgot to change the connection string.
Yeah.
So when you use these templates,
Autotator.
yeah. Whenever you use these templates inside of the README, there's actually a checklist of things to actually like do. Like, oh, you use this template. Hey, make sure to update this. Whenever we get to deployment, which we'll get to tomorrow, it looks like, or maybe even later today if we have time.
Okay.
We can actually like go through and see what all that actually means. In case you ever forget, like, what do I need to do? So I'm going to run my migrations against my database. As you see, it still worked, but it was on whatever database that it was pointing to before, which is probably a bad thing.
Yeah.
So here we are. We have our stuff now. We need our controllers, which, again, I'm going to bring over. I mean, we have them made. There's no point in us.
Right.
Actually, I want to just copy them. Car controllers. Nope. Dealer controller. And search controller. Let's make sure they're in the right namespace. So now we should be able to go to, inside of our browser, localhost :5000 and 1. Let's head there, check that out. We should be able to go to Swagger, and we should see our API, but we don't. What are your thoughts on Swagger?
It's a cool tool. It's very useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is.
What was the difference between that and Postman, which I was using before?
So Postman is a generic tool that you can use to hit any sort of API. All right. So like, let me. So. So my card controller. The namespace.
Shouldn't it be card search API dot controllers?
It wasn't saved.
Oh. Because I noticed that you're using namespace content dot controllers where before we did it.
Yeah, so this content, so just to kind of just to peel back the curtain a little bit, whenever you create a template like SDG React template, inside of that template there's a folder called content. So that's the template namespace that's there. I just have to flip a switch to use the actual folder name.
Okay.
Which whenever I push out the update for that fix, I'll also push out that fix as well. But now that's actually built in the latest version, my Swagger, there we go. So the difference between Swagger and Postman's a standalone. You can think of Postman like a beefier Chrome.
Okay.
Where it's like, oh, I can browse the web, I can see what's there, I can make HTTP requests, different types, of course, more than I can do in Chrome, to any sort of API. So it's like the generic tool. Swagger, this is a self-generating interactive API documentation. So let's kind of look at what that means. So self-documenting, self-generating. This is looking at our controllers.
It gave them all to you. You didn't have to create them.
Right, as well as our models. It's just saying, hey, what's in these folders? What's in those namespaces? Okay, what endpoints do they have? Mm-hmm. Let's create documentation for there. What does this API endpoint take? So it's saying, hey, it doesn't take anything. There's no parameters on it. And it returns this model, whatever this is. And if you look at this, this is just our car model. It's an array of car models. But it's just saying, hey, here's what it is. So it's looking at the code and creating this documentation for us. So it's a self-generating, interactive documentation. So what the interactive parts is that we have the try it out button.
Yeah.
Then we just go, hey, let's try out this call. Let's actually use and actually call our database. So we're going to call that endpoint, and this is what we got back.
There's nothing in it, yeah.
Which is expected because we don't have many cars in there.
Yeah.
If we go down to our dealer, hey, there's our one dealer. So that's the only difference. So this is built in. This is project specific. Postman is any project.
Right.
So that's the difference.
Okay.
Like whenever I would be in the field, I would create swaggers to give to my front-end developers. I'm like, hey, here's the API.
Okay.
I know the API is working because it's working here. And this is how you use the API. So it's kind of like an example of how to do it.
So then they would just install it into their project, the Swagger?
They wouldn't even they would just go to that URL.
Okay. Because it was already created?
Yep.
So it exists, so they can just go there.
Yep. So yeah. So my Swagger works, my API works. So now let's hook up this drop-down menu. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
If we recall, this drop-down menu from our original application was looking at all dealers inside of state and mapping over the value. And those dealers came from this function, load dealers, which did an AJAX call, an Axios call, back to home, back to its API, and then threw it in state. So let's bring this over. Back into our client app, back into our home. And let's call that in component did mounts. This dot load dealers. You notice how we have an issue here, right?
We haven't installed Axios.
Right. So the way to install stuff is head into the client app. Then once you're inside the client app, it's just like you're in a standard React project.
Okay. Because you couldn't just import it.
Mm-hmm.
So no importing from inside of here.
So you can and we will, but we can't import from the old project.
Okay. Right. Yeah. We just needed to add Axios.
Yep.
Is that what you did just now? Just yarn add Axios.
Mm-hmm.
At the top of this, will you have to import Axios from Axios?
I will.
Okay.
You're absolutely correct. Import Axios from Yep, because if you look at the actual like files, we see like here's our node modules. So like it's just a standard React app. It just happens to be housed inside of a .NET application. So once that's complete, you notice we don't get an issue with Axios. You also notice here we're doing a call to a full-fledged URL.
Yeah.
So like that's great. But that's because we had to. Because our React app was hosted on port 3000, right? But our API was on port 5000. Those were separate URLs. With the advantage of having them being separate projects, and the complexity of what that says is that now our React app has to track where our API is. So where's our dev API, where's our production API, where's our testing API? There's a lot of different configuration that comes along with it. But here, now that we're doing everything in one giant pot, we don't need to actually specify the URL. We can just say, hey, go to /API/dealer. So you can do that because that's how routing works whenever you're making AJAX calls. So if we had this, if we had an actual domain here, like we had before, it's going to go to that route. If we get rid of the .com stuff, the domain part of the URL, it's going to look at and give it /API/dealer. It's going to look at whatever domain I'm at /API/dealer.
Okay.
So whenever I deploy this up to Heroku and it has a different URL, it's no longer on localhost, I don't have to go in and manage all that stuff. It will automatically do that for me.
Okay. So /API/dealer.
So let's see if this works. Refresh. So dealer, hey, there it is. So that's awesome. So now we can do the same thing for load all cars as well. Bring this over. Get rid of that. Call this dot load all cars. Nothing too crazy, right? We don't have any cars, so that doesn't do us anything. But let's go and add a car real fast.
Yeah.
Add a car API. Does our render? Yep. Okay. So now I just pulled over our other Axios. So now we should be able to say, hey, give me a 2018, give me a pink 10 and then a new car over at Bongos, -1, add a car.
So you gave it the -1.
Yeah. So why did that not work? Six errors, eh? So 4 and HTML4. So if you saw this error, what would it mean to you?
I don't even remember where you put in for. The word for and label.
So this is one of the weird things, one of the weird quirks of working with Bootstrap, is that Bootstrap uses native HTML attributes inside of their code examples, but React wants like HTML for class name instead of class, stuff like that.
Okay.
So I'm going to head back over here. I'm actually going to close this one because we don't need it anymore. There we go. There we go. I'm going to search for HTML. Actually, search for equals. And I'm going to replace it with HTML4. So a good pro tip, whenever you are doing code replaces like this, don't do a replace all. Do it one at a time. It might seem a little bit tedious, but it will save you in the long run.
Yeah. How do you pull up that search all?
So Control F or Command F. Now that we've cleaned up all of that, 2018, pink, current mileage 10 is new cars, at the dealer, Mongo cars, -1.
All right, from that Command F, how would I do replace?
So see a little
drop down.
Yep.
Okay.
Toggle replacement.
I could replace one by one.
Yep.
All right.
This one replaces one, this one replaces all.
Yeah. Cool.
Yep. So we got an interesting error. The models, so we have an insert on the cars violates the foreign key constraint models ID. So
it looks familiar.
It does, right? So this says to me that, hey, the model ID that we're passing the cars is not correct. So this -1 is either wrong or we're not passing it correctly or something's wrong. Something's wrong with this. So now my detective skills are going to go, well, is my API getting the number or not? So am I actually passing my data correctly? Because this did work. We did have a working app last week. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to say, see where that's my get, here's my post. So inside of my post, my payload is empty. So that's interesting to me. So my payload should be something, right? Because we're actually passing it the new car to make.
Yeah.
So that's my error. So now I need to start unwinding where I got that. So let's check out our post. Let's start with our post. So we have, so let's see. Our post is going to the correct URL. And we can validate that right here.
Yeah.
And that's the right URL, that's the right verb.
Yep.
And our body is looking at state and pulling in the values. So let's look at state now. So if we look at state, down here into my home, hey, my state is empty. So even though I'm typing something,
Yeah.
it's not showing up in state.
Right.
So our handle change, that means that our handle change function is not right.
I don't think we even brought it over.
Yep. You would probably be correct there.
And can I use one handle change function for multiple?
Yep. I believe it's one per type is what we decided on. So like we have a handle change for our drop down, a handle change for a checkbox, and a handle change for our.
But if they're all the same type, you should be able to use it.
Yep. Team. So now before we try anything else, let's go in and double check that our, hey, it's in state now. So now we should be able to do and there we go. We've now added our first car.
I'm kind of stuck on that in my weekend homework assignment.
Okay.
So after the lecture, we're going to try to figure it out.
Yeah. So that being said, are you happy with this? Do you feel comfortable with this?
Yeah, it makes sense what you're doing.
It's nothing too crazy. Just the client app is now inside of the the project, as well as inside of the startup CS. There's a bit extra configuration going on here, which is pretty much use SPA static files and use SPA. This is what really the magic is doing right here. It's saying, hey, we're using a SPA. SPA is short for single page application. And it is inside of the client app.
Okay.
Like that's the only difference that you need to be aware of, but like we didn't even touch that.
Right. Well, I mean, you use a single page application because you now have everything on one.
Right, because React builds single page applications.
Okay. Yeah, that's what it does.
Yep. So we're saying, hey, use a SPA, and our SPA is located here, and our script to start it is npm run start.
Okay.
Nothing too nuts.
Right.
So if you're happy with this,
Yeah.
what questions do you have about your homework? We still have a little bit of time left.
Okay.
Do you want to plug in?
Yeah.